in Turkey are going to the polls to vote on whether to change the country from a parliamentary system to a presidential one. Why is President Erdogan so keen on getting stronger powers, and what will it mean for the future direction of Turkish foreign relations? And is China's pharmaceutical industry lagging behind its Western counterparts in terms of innovation and development? I'll be hearing from both a Chinese and Western expert to find out. Welcome to The Point. I'm Li Xin. Voters in Turkey will decide in a referendum on April the 16th whether to approve constitutional amendments that would change the structure of governance in Turkey from a parliamentary system to a presidential one. The amendments would greatly extend the powers of the president and abolish the position of the prime minister. All overseas voting ended on April the 9th, Sunday, though the result will not be announced until the polls in Turkey close on the 16th of April. Overseas campaigning has caused bitter rows between Turkey and some of its European neighbors or European countries. President Erdogan accused the Dutch and German authorities of acting like Nazis when they refused to allow Turkish officials to campaign in their countries. Will President Erdogan realize his political dream? What's next for Turkey's relationship with Europe? For more insight, I'm joined by Professor Selçuk Çalıkoğlu, Director of the Turkish Center for Asia-Pacific Studies in Ankara, Turkey, and Professor Tuğrul Keskin, a member of the Center for Turkish Studies at Shanghai University. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Professor Çalıkoğlu, let me come to you first. All overseas voting in the Turkish referendum end on Sunday, April the 9th, with the main vote due to take place on April the 16th. Now, around 3 million people are eligible to vote outside of Turkey. Almost half of them live in Germany. Now, Turkey has been sparing no efforts to chase these overseas votes, which has caused a bitter row with its European counterparts. How much do you think the overseas votes could influence the final result of the referendum?
Many surveys show that yes and no votes are neck to neck. So this is why the international votes, particularly the overseas votes, has become very important. And that's why then to campaigning, particularly yes campaign, try to become more active particularly in European countries. As you said, Germany and some other European countries having the hub of the international votes for Turkish citizens. So that's why they are focusing on that. But because of those campaigns in recent weeks and months, the situation has become more complicated because of the reactions from the local governments, from Germany, the Netherlands and others. So these countries are not very happy to see Turkish government officials, particularly ministers, are actively engaged in the yes campaign, and also these governments, also local governments, consider that these Turkish ministers taking parts of the campaign will or increase the further divide within the Turkish communities in those countries. So that's why international votes are very important for both camps in Turkey during the referendum campaign. But on the other, it has become an increasing problem between the Turkish government and European governments in general. So this is the situation right now. And also there is an increasing concern, particularly for Turkish communities living in Germany, the Netherlands and others. This confrontation between two parties, Turkish government and others, will deteriorate and severe their situations there. So also they are not very, because of all these developments, Turkish diaspora are not very eager to vote or participate this referendum process and going to ballot box because of these some negative outcomes.
Professor Keskin, a recent overview of 28 public opinion polls by the Turkish news website T24 shows that while 12 predict a win for the no camp, 8 predict a win for the yes camp. How do you look at the comparison so far, and what do you think will be the kind of heated competition between the yes and no camp during the final round of the voting on the 16th of April?
I think, as you know, this campaign is going to head-to-head. Therefore, it's very important to have, you know, this diaspora Turks, you know, votes, and that's why AKP and JDP, Just and Development Party, basically was lobbying in the, you know, in Europe, basically in general. Therefore, those votes are very important as well as in Turkey. But when we look at, you know, the last polls from the last elections, most of the polls in the past basically misled the public. After the election, we see the different result. This will be the similar one. I think this election will be the similar one the previous elections and previous referendums, and I think we might have a surprise in this new recent, you know, the referendum, which will change the, you know, the Turkish politics next decade substantially.
Mm-hmm. So we do not.
Therefore.
Yeah, so we do not know really what's going to happen, and we cannot make that prediction based on the poll results at this moment. Professor Çolakoğlu, President Erdogan and the ruling Justice and Development Party, or AK Party, argue that an executive presidency will make Turkey more stable, considering the country is dealing with various issues such as regular terrorist attacks and the fallout from last July's failed coup attempt. However, the opposition parties, led by the Republican People's Party, or the CHP, argue that the changes will create a one-man rule by degrading democratic institutions and the separate powers in the country. What do you think that a presidential republic will do to Turkey? More harm or more good?
Until now, it is not clear how system bring Turkey for Turkey's future. But usually those camps try to focus on the voters to persuade their campaign is good for Turkey for Turkey's next years. But also we need to keep in mind the system change will take into reality after 2 years by 2019, after the next presidential election for that. So now we can clearly say that Turkish society and also even the parties are divided too, in favor of for yes campaign or no campaign. So it's very interesting time for Turkey right now.
Professor Keskin, just in case the yes campaign really wins out and Turkey really goes towards a presidential system, what will that have as kind of negative impact on Turkey's relationship with the European Union, which is already very strained at this moment?
In Turkish public, basically, you know, the European Union, favorability of the European Union is getting less and less every day, and decreasing basically since the, you know, the 2004 and 2005. Because of the, you know, the economic development in Turkey and more independent foreign policy of the Turkey, more independent foreign policy not just from the Europe but also from the United States. Therefore, we see a lot of tension between United States and NATO-oriented countries in Europe. Turkey. With new presidential system and new constitution, actually it was going to be held in late 2018 and 2019, but as a result of the, you know, the failed coup organized by the Fethullah Gülen, supported by the United States, and December 17 and 25, 2013 corruption campaign against the AKP government, basically, and they are holding this, you know, this referendum earlier. This will substantially change the Turkish foreign policy. Turkey, especially Turkey, last several years, is having a very difficult time with United States and NATO and European Union. With new presidential system, I believe, you know, this will not be a dictatorship as, you know, New York Times or Washington Post or The Economist portray. This will be more democratic system, the different kind of democratic system, like many different countries around the world, different than the Western style democracy. But we might change the, you know, the foreign policy substantially. As you can see, you know, recent speeches by Erdogan, President Erdogan, basically. Of course, we will have some difficulties, obstacles. Turkey is not as independent as other countries around the world, because dependent on the European Union, dependent on the United States military aid. Turkey, that we should remember, Turkey is the third important military recipient of the United States after Israel and Egypt. But on the other hand, United States and Europe is investing and has been investing in the Kurdish areas in northern Syria, northeast part of the Syria, and Iraq. And as a result of this, Turkish public and Turkish state, including the AKP, including the Nationalist Movement Party, MHP, most of the Turkish public, they are not happy about the US involvement and European involvement in the Kurdish issue. Therefore, Turkish public pushing the AKP to change the foreign policies. Probably we will see the little over 50% of the yes vote, and as a result of this, Turkey will have a new negotiation with the United States and NATO and European Union in the near future, and we might change the certain foreign policy objectives related with China as well.
Professor Çolakoglu, I want to pick up from that. As we have heard, the relationship between Turkey and Europe is on bad terms, and it's likely that this is going to get worse in the near future, if not in the long term. And some people are saying Turkey should look more to the east to have a stronger relationship with Russia and with China. What is your idea, what is your opinion on the future cooperation between Turkey and countries in the east after the referendum?
I don't think that this may cause automatic rapprochement with Russia and China if there's a yes outcome after the referendum, because when we look at the Turkish-Russian relations now in recent weeks, Turkey can face some difficulties with Russia. Turkey and Russia failed to coordinate their policies in Syria, and also more importantly, Russia is giving support Kurdish-led PYD in northern Syria, and also very recently Russia declared PKK and PYD, and particularly PKK, is not a terrorist organization. This is a difference because this is a very harsh statement from Russia, and also very Turkish politicians and Turkish leaders get very unpleasant because of this statement from Russian side, because the European countries, the EU and NATO countries, stating PKK is a terrorist organization, but PYD is a partner in Syria. So it's very complicated right now, depending on yes and no outcome. I think Turkey may consider their foreign policy orientation, but Turkey needs time to, how can I say, very radical change for foreign policy in the long run.
You.
We will see
Professor
after the end of the referendum.
Sure. Professor Çolakoglu, thank you very much, and Professor Teksin, thank you as well for joining us on this discussion about the future of Turkey. Whether President Erdogan gets the powers he wants or not, Turkey's foreign policy needs to be more principled and independent for the country to solve the problems it is facing, such as recurring terrorist attacks, and to regain its economic momentum. Whether this referendum will go some way to solving its problems, the jury is still out on this. You're watching The Point. We'll be back right after this. The pharmaceutical industry is an important part of our national economy. Some say by observing the development of one country's medical and pharmaceutical sector, it can gauge the wellness of its citizens. The research and development capacities of drugs is a critical phase in the pharmaceutical sector. What are China's R&D capabilities like? What are the best practices China can learn from its international counterparts? I talked earlier with Professor Xiao Fei from the China Food and Drug Administration's Institute of Executive Development. He joined us from Shanghai. Welcome, Professor Xiao Fei. Now, the Western drug market in China is dominated by generic drugs, also with relatively weak R&D capability, patients with serious diseases still have difficulty in accessing the most innovative drugs that are available in the international markets. In terms of research and development of innovative drugs, where does China stand among its international counterparts?
Okay. Actually, our status of pharmaceutical company, pharmaceutical development in China as the only behave like a follower, because trace back to the history of drug development, actually New China been blocked by Western country for close to 30 years, and the new pharmaceutical business just restart after this reform period, just after 1978. So China gradually built up this modern manufacturing facilities and match with Western country standards like GMP. So at first, China focused on this manufacturing and then behave like a copycat, and there was no intellectual property protection before 1986. So, and China can do whatever they like to copy the Western countries' products without any hurdle. And then after 1993, and China and the US signed this intellectual protection treaty, and then the pharmaceutical sectors have to respect the international patent right, and then have to follow the rule of internationals, and have to wait and observe the development of the Western country in pharmaceutical sectors, and do generic development after the patent expire. So this tradition is just keep going up to today. So, and China realized this innovation is the key force, key strength in the future. So just catch up to do R&D, and but let's take time to catch up with the Western country.
China has been catching up pretty fast. The statistics from the Nature Index indicate that essays and articles written by Chinese experts and published in the top international journal of life sciences have increased from some 4,000 in 2012 to 6,500 in 2015, only secondary to the United States. However, the application or commercialization of the academic and scientific outcome is relatively low. Why? And are there any best practices China can learn from other countries?
Yes, and that's true. Chinese scientific research publication has to catch up with US, and least as the second largest publication, contribute to this scientific society. However, and when we do analysis on the quality of these publications, the original discovery or the significant discovery or invention generated by Chinese scholars is still very rare. But however, and just a month ago, the cover page of Journal of Science, Chinese scholar generate 4 big pieces of paper showing this artificial synthesis of the chromosome. So that's you see this happened in China, in Chinese lab, as really did wonderful job to contribute to the basic science. So we are waiting for the miracle happened in near future, because we have already accumulated strengths and a lot of data here in China, and the government support those research, and then can help this translational medicine, and eventually to convert this scientific discovery into invention, and then produce the valuable drug to treat disease and heal the patient.
For more discussion about this topic, joining me in the studio is Mike Dethick, Managing Director of R&D-based Pharmaceutical Association Committee. Mike, thank you very much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you.
We heard Professor Xiao talking about China's weak R&D capabilities, and even now patients with serious diseases having difficulty in accessing most innovative drugs that are available in the international markets. Why do you think China is lagging behind in this regard?
Okay, I personally think that lagging might not be the best description. I think it raises a lot of questions, and there's lots of different areas, all of which are interconnected. I think one of the fundamental principles is the need for China to develop and foster a drug innovation ecosystem. And creating the right type of environment and the right system for China. If we do that, that will address a lot of the issues in terms of access to innovative medicines.
What do you mean by an innovation ecosystem?
I think when you look at all of the issues that the multinational pharmaceutical companies face and the domestic industry face and the reform agenda that the government is implementing, there are many interconnected issues, all of which need to work together. So you need to have a system, a reform system or a health system that encourages innovation. And that's a very easy thing to say, but ultimately it involves government top-down. It will involve a proper pricing and reimbursement system. It certainly includes making sure that there is access to innovative medicines. So there is a whole mechanism that works together that would facilitate better innovation within China. I think that's a priority for the government.
Well, considering the demographic structure and the diseases that have a high incidence rate among the Chinese people, what kind of a specific disease or product spectra would you recommend for the Chinese pharmaceutical business insiders and for the Chinese government in speeding up their R&D?
Sure. You know that in itself is a very sensitive and an emotive issue because we are talking about factors that have impact on people's health. You look at demographics, the fact that China has an aging population. You look at urbanization, environmental issues. All of these actually impact on health and ultimately on medicine and the requirement to treat patients. Mm-hmm. I think within China, one of the significant areas that needs attention is non-communicable diseases. So we see higher rates of cancer, higher rates of diabetes, Alzheimer's. The problem will only, if it's not addressed, will only increase because the population is increasing. So it is in those areas that I think that we need to focus in developing or having the ability to drive innovation in medicine development.
Do you have the feeling, do you have the sense that this is being done at this moment, or is there any area where you see that can be sped up in terms of the kind of policy that are in place by the Chinese government?
It's important that the first thing, that innovative medicines are allowed access. Mm-hmm. That's one of the key drivers, market access, to bring innovation into China. But it's also about encouraging the development of innovation of medicine within China, within the biopharma industry. How we price and how we reimburse those medicines is going to be really, really important. Mm-hmm. So the factors of pricing and reimbursement, access, clinical trials and science have a huge part to play on developing new medicines. At the moment, there are bottlenecks. You describe them as bottlenecks that the government's fully aware of, and policies are being issued, and we're trying to develop the process. But what it causes is delay. So that it's a knock-on effect. If there's a delay in one area, even if you see development in another, ultimately it may slow down the whole process. And you have to put it into the context of the development of new medicines. When you look at actually how long it takes to really produce a blockbuster new innovative medicines, 10 to 15 years, longer for China. If you look at the cost of developing, the investment that needs to go into developing a new medicine, in the 1970s, it was maybe 100 million US dollars. It's quadrupled. You know, we look at it, the cost today, 2010, it's something like 2.6 billion US dollars.
That is also one of the key areas where China is also having, at least for the moment, some difficulty. That is the commercialization, that is the application of the huge amount of academic and research work that the Chinese has been doing. I mean, we have been publishing a lot of papers in the international journals, secondary only to the United States. But why is it lagging behind? Please allow me to use that word again, and what needs to be done in the future.
Okay, so I think when you come to, first off, I think it's a positive signal. You know, that there is so much publications going on, and actively scientists are looking at it. And that's something that I think the government has been very proactive into encouraging research and encouraging scientists and actually the returnees, you know, educated abroad coming back to China for the future. I think in terms of why that doesn't translate into actual physical delivery
not yet,
and that's the point, you know. So it's a timing issue, I think, is first thing. Second thing, I think that perhaps in the past, and the difference between perhaps China and the US is that the US on their innovation will use new molecule models. So it's actually new technology, if that's the best descriptor. Whereas I think in China, when they've tried to develop a lot of the innovation, it's been based on existing knowledge. So there is a need to actually, when the government looks at investment, and to encourage the entrepreneurs to try and develop the new technology platforms for innovation.
Thank you very much. It's a big topic, but we have to leave it here for today. Thank you. That's Mike Dethick, Managing Director of R&D-based Pharmaceutical Association Committee.
Thank you.
The life expectancy of the average Chinese people was something like 39 years when the new China was founded in 1949, and that number doubled in the past 60 years to reach 76. And now the Chinese government is sparing no efforts to raise that number by one more year to reach 77. And the effort behind that number is huge. What we are witnessing is the great efforts made by the Chinese people to learn from its international counterparts so that we can achieve that big goal. You have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin, here on CGTN. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the CGTN Live application to watch our show on your mobile devices. For previous shows, you can go to the CGTN page on YouTube, click on Playlist and look for The Point with Liu Xin. I'll see you next time on CGTN.